المدرسة صوت على قلبي عسل يلا يا باص المدرسة خذنا على درب الأمل زمر باص المدرسة صوت على قلبي عسل يلا يا باص المدرسة خذنا على درب الأمل.
Welcome to Schools Out. Today we are discussing the issue of homework, a bane for the learners but always given by the teachers. With me this morning I have Dr. Mishek Indebele, who is a senior lecturer at the Wits School of Education in Johannesburg. Welcome to the show, Dr. Indebele.
Thank you, Shakira. Nice to be here in your show.
What is the reason, Dr. Indebele, that teachers give homework?
Well, the general practice amongst teachers is to give homework for a couple of reasons. The first one is actually to enable learners to practice. Now, the thing is they have to reinforce what has been learned in class. Now, that's one main reason. But then also homework is done for preparation. Teachers may be preparing for the next lesson and they will want the learners to be ready for the next lesson, so they want them to read ahead.
Okay.
Well, another thing is really to give learners an opportunity to explore and even use resources like the internet, like reference books, like the library itself. Just to have children explore outside the classroom things related to what they have learned.
Okay. From your research, Dr. Ndebele, what can you tell us about the effectiveness of homework at schools?
It has been a mixed bag, I would say, because our schools these days comprise children that come from different socio-economic backgrounds, and that actually influences the way homework is implemented in schools. But I would say here, from my research, there was overwhelming support for the use of homework. People liked the use of homework despite their socio-economic backgrounds. But the only difference was in the actual implementation of homework to actually ensure that schools do that homework. There were problems of poverty in my research. Schools that had a lot of children from impoverished backgrounds had problems. Now, poverty was an issue, and as we might all know, poverty would affect the accommodation, the furniture, the time, and so forth. But I would say one outstanding thing was the language issue. Now, homework is being issued in English, and some of the parents, most of the parents, especially in the poorer places, did not know how to read English documents. And we think of parents from outside the country, the French speaking from the DRC and all that. That was a challenge in my research. But another thing was the absence of a standard policy for homework. The Department of Education has said nothing about homework policy. So teachers are inventing their own things. But I would say here, despite all this, I saw that schools were taking their own initiative, coming up with their own homework policies, some of which were quite excellent. But I would say lastly that there was an overload of homework that parents complained about. They felt that our children are being overloaded with homework, and as a result they're losing interest in schoolwork and all that.
On that topic, on that note, in terms of the children being overloaded with homework and compounded with the poverty issue, are we then not creating an area of contention because we're giving the children homework and some have better resources than others, but our judgment criteria may not always reflect that? Is that not an issue that teachers should be considering?
It is actually, that is one of the debates leading to some schools and educationists trying to do away with homework. because of these inequalities. Because when you have that inequality in the background, in the socio-economic background, naturally there will be an inequality in the outcome, in the product at the end. The children are definitely not going to perform in the same, because they are coming from different backgrounds. So it's something that needs to be debated, and I wouldn't say there is an answer yet. It's an ongoing debate.
Right. Do you then think that perhaps schools should look at the way we structure our homework, and maybe it shouldn't be considered like a lot of parents complain it's like they have to reteach at home. So homework should be done perhaps independently by the learners, by themselves?
I wouldn't go that far. I think what's important still is the role of the teacher. I wouldn't say that parents should be on their own, nor should teachers be on their own. I think there should be that partnership between teachers and parents, so that there should be constant communication, constant feedback from both sides. I wouldn't say it's something that should be left out to the parents alone, because they are not educators.
Exactly.
They are not trained to do those things.
Yes,
but I think they should borrow ideas from people who are actually experts.
Right. Yeah. And then what are some of the parental expectations of homework? Does it, for instance, allow an opportunity for parents to bond with their children, or give parents the idea of where their children are at whilst they do homework? So it gives parents a window of opportunity to look into, where is my child at, if they can help them with something. Do you think there's value in that?
Yes, I think it is true that parents benefit from homework, in the sense that it is like a window into the school. They are looking at what is actually happening in the classroom. And at the same time, the school is also having a way of communicating with the parents, alerting them of what is happening in the classroom. So yes, I think it is actually helpful in that regard. Yeah.
What do you think, do you suggest that teachers should ideally consider? What are some of the points they should consider when assigning homework to their learners?
I think there are quite a few things here. Mainly, teachers should consider the amount of homework. Sometimes we actually overwhelm our children and even the parents themselves. In other words, it should not be over excessive. It mustn't be excessive. And you must consider, will this child manage this homework at such and such a time? So there must be the time element, because younger children need less homework because their the concentration span is actually shorter. And so if you give them long homework, then they're going to be bored, and it's against actually the rules of teaching and learning. We should also consider that some parents arrive late at home to assist their children. So if you have parents who are working in the factories and coming late by buses and taxis, and then you give homework, you've got to consider some of those things. Understand the parental occupation. What is occupying the parents' time? And also consider the language spoken at home. When you give this homework, are you sure that the parent is going to be able to read what you expect the child to do? I also think that you need to actually consider whether parents are actually interested in homework itself. For example, we're talking right now that some parents, some schools want to do away with homework. Now, if you are going to give homework when the general feeling around that school is that no homework, you see, so you have to consider the attitudes towards homework. So now we have to do some dialogue here, discuss and see whether homework really matters. And finally, maybe there's a need for you to consider technological support.
Yes.
Because some children, as you hinted earlier, come from homes where, you don't have the computer, you don't have this and that to do homework, even electricity for that matter. So what we are saying here is you have to consider the technological support that this child is going to have while doing homework.
So those are important points that teachers should remember. And then also when you mentioned earlier about looking at what the parents, you said this dialogue that parents should have, because you also mentioned that the GDE has not actually come up with a homework policy, which leaves the door open for schools to make their own decisions.
Exactly.
Each school comes up with their own homework policy.
Exactly.
So you said you would suggest that schools have a dialogue with their parents and create a policy, or how should it be?
Look, I think the starting point should be the dialogue between the school and the parents, and then we would say, now the Department of Education could be approached and asked to buy into this whole thing and say, okay, support us. Now, this is our approach. Now, support us.
Right.
Now, that is one way. Another way is for the general, for a blanket policy that the department can issue to schools, which I think would not work well, because schools have different challenges.
Yes.
So maybe really, yes, while the Department of Education should not turn a blind eye to what's going on in terms of homework, I personally feel that it still has a role to play in at least standardizing, giving the basic tenets of homework. When we say homework must be done in schools, what are the basic ones? The other smaller, the finer detail could be from the schools, who are going to be working with the parents to actually implement these basic tenets that the department will have given. That's my view.
Right, okay. Thank you very much for this discussion on homework, Dr. Ndebele, and for sharing your views with us.
Thank you so much, Shakira.
And that was Dr. Ndebele from the University of the Witwatersrand talking about the issue of homework. Stay with us. We are breaking now for an ad break, and we will be back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Schools Out. We are now talking to Mr. Gavin Keller, who is the principal of Sun Valley Primary School in Noordhoek, Cape Town. And his school has an amazing policy where there is no homework. But it goes deeper than that. To tell us more, we are chatting to Mr. Gavin Keller. Welcome to the show, Mr. Keller.
Thank you so much.
All right, tell us, what brought you to this point where you decided to change your homework policy?
Well, we've been for a long time staying abreast with what they now call brain-based teaching, and really making sure that in the 21st century that our schools are being designed and that the curriculum is being taught in a way that is in alignment with the human brain. And we know for years that it hasn't been. And so as we have walked this route, we became more and more aware of the role of anxiety in shutting down neural pathway creation. And the more we researched it, the more we realized that if we could create a space where there was minimum anxiety, and that we were not producing cortisol in the brains of our children, but rather dopamine for our boys and serotonin for our girls, we could literally change the way the brain laid neural pathways. And so as we debated this, we identified that one of the greatest causes of anxiety in schools was homework and assessment, the testing structure. And so we decided to make a fundamental shift and do away with those anxiety-causing methods in schools.
Okay, and I'm sure your learners, I presume, are really very happy about this no homework policy. So how does that pan out in their achievements and in their, have you noticed any difference in them since you've chosen to do this?
Well, it was a very interesting decision to make. We we actually were a little cruel in the sense that we did a trial of 6 months where we overemphasized homework and we overemphasized testing. We went into a weekly testing system where we really put the children through high levels of schooling anxiety in order to get a benchmark on what levels your academics would be at those high levels of testing and anxiety. And then in the July, we withdrew all homework and weekly testing. And we compared the June results to the December results. And the result was phenomenal. All scores increased. So when children are not having to anticipate a test, we're not saying they're not testing, but we're not telling you that tomorrow at 9 o'clock you're going to write a maths test. What's happening is that you'll come to school tomorrow, and in the maths lesson, we'll just start off with a quick test to see how you've mastered the work. And the information that we gain from that test informs me as the teacher how well I have taught you and what you have mastered and what you haven't and what I need to reteach. And the second thing we did was we made a bit of an agreement with them. I said to them, I will do away with homework if you commit to reading for a minimum of 20 minutes a day. And so we did this whole pledge in assembly that I promised that if the teacher gave you homework, I won't pay them at the end of the month. And you got to promise back that you will always read every day. And of course, with typical teachers, they wanted a little control chart. They wanted the children to say what pages they're going to read in, and they wanted the parents to sign it. And within 3 months, we did away with that because the children were out reading the expectation in every grade across the school. And as a result, we couldn't keep up with the books. Our library we had to change the whole budget to create more money to buy books. The local library in the village had to get some extra books in, and our children really became incredible readers. And what we've learned is that reading is actually the source of real knowledge. And schooling is the place where you learn to get on with other people.
Okay. All right. Now that falls obviously within a broader view of education that is different to the norm in South African schools. Tell us about your view.
So I believe that schooling, and not only in South Africa, but actually all over the world, is very much part of an industrial revolution. It is no longer relevant. It is a system that is so backward. It's almost like taking a modern online shopping experience and comparing it with the corner shop that we used to have in the 1920s and saying, I wonder why the corner shop's no longer working. And the reality is that schools are no longer working. What we need to do is we've got to make schooling 21st century compatible. And that means we've got to stay abreast with what our young people are facing every day. And that means we've got to reinvent, redesign, reimagine, and create a space where they love being at school. Because when you love being at school, when enjoyment outshines anxiety, in other words, on the continuum from anxiety to enjoyment, if I can keep you in the enjoyment zone, I know that the human brain, based on functional MRI scans, will lay neural pathways. If I keep you in the anxiety zone, I'm going to push you down through your emotional brain, down into your survival brain, and there's no learning is going to take place.
So do you believe that homework then pushes children down into the survival mode?
Absolutely, because you've got this load of work. And what often happens is that teachers will use it as a discipline method. So if you do not complete the work, you're going to do it for homework.
Yes.
Now I've got this load of work, plus I've got the projects, plus teachers are not, and this is a great generalization, but what I see all over the world is that there are deadlines for marks and assessments to be handed and grades to be handed in. So teachers tend to push all the projects for the week or two before that. And so these children are overwhelmed with the amount of work that has to be done. Instead of doing those projects at school, during school time, and there is plenty of time. When people say to me, there's no time, the curriculum's too full, I say, well, you've designed a bad curriculum. You've got 200 school days a year. You've got 6 hours a day at school. take those hours and design your curriculum to fit in those hours. And when a child is working with other children on a project, that's the real work. Very seldom are you sent to an office in the world of work today and say, you go and design the braking system of this car on your own. No, you're going to a team and you're going to work with a diverse, multicultural group of people in order to design that. And our schools are not doing that. They're putting children at desks on their own and telling them, I want to hear and I want to see what you know. And there's very few places in the world of work where that is required today.
Absolutely. And given that South Africa has such a disparity in terms of households,
Absolutely.
even the projects that if you're going to send them home, naturally they're going to come with, depending on the child's socioeconomic status.
And in a school like ours, which reaches into the very wealthy and the very poor, it's a fascinating community because the children who are growing up in the township are waking up with a mother who has already left to go to work for the parents of the child who is really wealthy to make them breakfast so that they can get that child. So the wealthy child's mom and the poor child's mom are in different places. And the support structure is so different. And yet we're expecting them all to deliver at the same pace and to feel that they're equal and to feel that they are capable. So when we say to them, no, we will provide what you need. You're going to work in diverse groups here at school and you're going to deliver a combined project and the mark is going to be shared amongst you. Gosh, then you see children learning to work together and deciding what is your strength and what is your strength.
Yes.
And wow, you can draw and you've got access to this. All right, let's get this information together and let's produce it and share ideas.
And how have your parents responded to your no homework policy and this change in the way you do manage projects?
Well, I have an interesting mindset when it comes to parenting. And having raised my own children and putting them through school, I think as school leaders, we make a big mistake when we make our parents the client. The child in the school must be the client because the world that they're going to go in is very different to the world that their parent went into. So the parent must be the sponsor. The child must be the client. And my experience was that 80% of our parents loved it. 20% were a little concerned. And of those 20%, 2% were toxic. And they packed their bags and went to a school that delivered lots of homework. And I can guarantee that every one of those children will be on medication by the age of 21.
So do you think that the parents perhaps need educating in terms of the dangers or pitfalls of homework?
I think we as parents need to learn to allow our children to be who they were destined to be and not try to make them into excellent sheep because they actually need to do what they must do in life. And I have a dream that children will grow up feeling confident, competent, and capable to do what they want to do with their lives.
Wise words indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Keller, for sharing your insights with us.
Pleasure.
All right, and that was Mr. Gavin Keller from Sun Valley Primary School, who is the principal who has tried new things, groundbreaking new things at his school. Join us again next week for another episode of Schools Out. I hope you found this episode on homework informative and useful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
زمر باص المدرسة صوت على قلبي